Dr. Samih Abdel Jalil. And what is it that we're doing tonight? We're doing Cézanne. We're doing chapter 3. We have already covered chapters 1 and 2. Chapter 1 was on Cleopatra, and chapter 2 was on Christopher Marlowe, if you still remember. And today, perhaps next time, we'll be focusing on Cézanne. We're moving from history through literature to art. And by art here, I mean painting. And we're doing Cézanne, who happens to be a late 19th century. Not a late, I mean, he was born sometime in the middle of the 19th century, 1839 to be specific. But he happens to be a 19th century artist, and by artist, of course, I mean a painter. So again, this is perhaps a new aspect of art. We've been talking about different genres. We've been talking about different discourses. We started off with history with Cleopatra, and then we moved on to literature, and now it's the arts or art, specifically painting. And before I proceed, I would like to ask you whether you guys sometimes paint and draw. Do we have, painters, somebody who paints? And of course, paint, oh yeah, okay. Do we have painters? Do we have people who catch themselves painting and drawing? Come to the mic. Yeah, somebody wanted to perhaps say yes, but somehow she stopped.
Yes, me.
Yeah, what's your name?
Ghaida.
Right, Ghaida, right?
Yes, right.
Okay, Ghaida, what kind of painting are you interested in?
Just love. I would like painting with imagination painting. I don't painting or I don't draw true things, right?
So in terms of sure, art and painting also has its different genres. You can have portraiture where you portray. You can be portraying people, for example. You can be portraying landscape. You can be portraying still life, as we're going to see in a minute. So, the paintings that you paint, are they?
The most time I'm painting nature.
Nature,
but
landscape.
But the landscape and sky, sea, but with this extra or extreme touch with fantasy.
Okay, so you mix reality with the imagination, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly right.
So, okay. Nice, very interesting. So your starting point would be something real, and then it triggers thoughts and ideas at the back of your mind, and then you end up having something that is a mix between whatever is real and whatever is kind of imaginary, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Do you have other people who also are artistic? Okay. So, okay. So let's go to the chapter. So this is chapter 3, as you know, and this is Cézanne, and Cézanne happens to be a French painter from the 19th century. Okay, so again, it's about reputation. And again, it's about contested reputation. It's not pure reputation. It's again the idea that you have people who are all for Cézanne, and you also have people who are all against him. Again, we'll talk about that because again, this is part of our reputation project, if you like. The fact that we have a whole book focused on the idea of reputation, good and bad, and reasons for reputation, good and bad. We have done that with Christopher Marlowe, and we have done that with Cleopatra, if you still remember. So these are the items that we're going to cover together in the chapter. So we're going to talk about Cézanne's renown. When somebody is renowned, it means that he is famous and popular. Will introduce you to terms and techniques, and of course, those terms and techniques are related to painting. We'll talk about tradition and modernity because, as you're going to see, Cézanne is going to be representing modernity as opposed to tradition. And this is perhaps part of the reason why people are polarized over him and his art. So, of course, people who believe in modernity and the fact that we shouldn't be all the time stuck in old forms and in traditions, they would, of course, embrace him and say that he is one of the best. While those who are, firm believers in the importance of traditions and established rules would say no, he is deviating from whatever is established, whatever is honored and respected. And in this sense, they would say, no, he is not a good painter. So we're going to have this debate between traditionalists and modernists. And our example would be Cézanne. And we'll talk about, perhaps a number of genres. Again, they are all related to Cézanne and his reputation. We're going to talk about a genre, an artistic genre by the name of the nude or the modern nude. We're going to also have some testimonials, people talking about him, and some of them are detractors. Detractors are critics, people who would criticize him, were people who would kind of accuse him of not being very accomplished when it comes to using material, mixing colors, and they would say that technically he is not a very important painter. You will also have people who would say there is obviously more to art and to painting than just being able to mix colors and to use material. They focus on the idea of talent and the fact that artists are born. For them, arts are born, not made. Okay, so we're going to have this polarity. We're going to have this distinction between arts as natural born artists, if you like, and those artists who are made in the sense that they receive training, they engage in workshops, they copy other people and see how they do stuff, and they become artists. So we're going to have this kind of debate on whether artists are born or made. There is going to be some talk about painting, especially painting the landscape, because Cézanne is going to be inspired by where he was originally born, in the villages of France, in the south of France, where there is going to be a great deal of inspiration that he is taking from there. Again, we will go to some examples of his paintings, especially those who uh, gave him the reputation that he now enjoys, like the still life style of painting that he embraced and adopted and even perfected. And finally, we'll move to also the idea, this polarity between scholars and owners when it comes to painting. So these are the ideas that we're going to kind of explore together when it comes to Cézanne and his reputation. We will need there is obviously an annex or a book that you guys have, a book of illustrations. We'll need it because we're going to have reproductions of the paintings. Of course, we don't have the original paintings because they are in museums and art galleries, and they are sold for thousands and maybe millions of dollars. So we cannot have them. We have reproductions. We have copies of them, and of course that would. If you're given the chance, you would go and see them and perhaps watch documentaries about them where they are recorded and stuff. So again, we'll have those examples and those paintings reproduced in the book that I'm telling you about. So what are some of the aims? Well, why are we having Cézanne as material? Again, we're going to introduce the work of the French artist Paul Cézanne. Again, we'll talk about reasons why he was reputed, reasons for his reputation. Reputation, of course, good and bad, because you're going to have this fluctuation when it comes to his reputation. At one point, he would be considered a great painter, and at another point, perhaps during his early stages of development, he would be looked upon with perhaps ridicule and disdain. Again, if it's about painting, so we'll have some grounding and some introduction to the art of painting, and we'll have on the way and in the process some technical terms and concepts. Will kind of unravel and unpack them as we proceed. Again, if we're talking about painting, we'll talk about composition, but I would like to tell you that this is not a class in painting. This is a class perhaps in appreciating paintings. We're not going to, or the book does not aspire to perhaps train you in painting so that you become painters and artists. No, this is not our aim. Our aim would be to introduce you to some samples of painting so that you may find perhaps interest in paintings, and you will be able to develop tools as how you can appreciate paintings. Again, we're going to also try to discover meaning and value in the relationships between the works of different kinds. So it's Cézanne, everyone. It's Paul Cézanne, who lived between 1839 and 1906. Remember, this is the time, if we talk about 1839 and 1906, I mean, the early stages of his life, I'm talking about Cézanne, would link him to the Romantics and the Romantic age, where there was a great deal of rebellion against established forms and techniques, whether we're talking about poetry or the arts. So it would be natural, it would be logical if we have Paul Cézanne and he would come and say, "Listen, I don't believe in old traditions when it comes to painting. I'm going to do my own stuff." So you know that he was part of a climate of ideas that was changing and forcing people to change. I'm going to just give you an example of how reputation would make all the difference for artists and poets. If you look at the painting that we're having, this is a painting, and this style of painting is called still life. We'll talk more about what still life paintings mean and communicate. But as you can see, initially, it's this is still life. Yeah? You have fruit. You have it's life, yeah, because somehow it is related and connected to real life by having fruit and and elements and items that we meet in real life, but it's still means that you don't have movement. So again, this is a style of painting, a genre of painting that Cézanne was popular or famous for. This painting sold for $60.5 million. Can you imagine?
That is too much.
Yeah. This is the point. This is exactly the point. Again, so it wasn't sold for that big amount or exaggerated amount of money because of its intrinsic values, not because it was a masterpiece or one of a kind. It was sold at this price because of the reputation of Cézanne. Okay, so sometimes if you have a canonized writer or artist, people would buy his stuff at a very high and a very elevated price, not because of how original this piece of work is. It's because of the reputation that the writer has. You can almost kind of apply the same idea to what we call celebrity endorsement. You know what or who celebrities are? Celebrities are famous people, right? It can be a movie star, can be a footballer, right? So from time to time, you see them on television, promoting a product, right? And you go and buy the product not because you think that the product is good and everything, because you haven't tried it yet. You simply go and buy the product because it was promoted by a famous person, by a celebrity. This is called celebrity endorsement. They endorse the product regardless of whether the product has those intrinsic values that they claim it has. It's exactly the same thing. You have a famous painter or a famous poet, okay, and because you heard the name of the poet or the artist, I mean, without blindly, without reading the poem, without looking very closely at the painting, you say, "Ah, it's an excellent poem, it's an excellent painting," and it's not excellent at all, right? So you cannot dispute famous people. You cannot dispute their work. This is the problem. You cannot challenge them because they are canonized, and because of the fact that they have such heavy presence, people would simply say, "Who are you to say that Cézanne, this painting is not as good as the other paintings, for example, or this poem is not as good." Can you do that? I mean, let's take the example of Shakespeare, for example. Can you come? Did we do anything with Shakespeare? No, we didn't. Yeah, perhaps next semester you will have Othello, for example. You read it, and you may come up with the opinion that it's not a very beautiful play. I don't like it. It's not one of Shakespeare's best plays. Can you say that? Would you be allowed to say that? No. Shakespeare is such a canonized writer, and saying that stuff would be taken very lightly. People are going to simply say, "Who are you to say that this play is not good or stuff?" Okay, so as you can see, this is a painting by Cézanne, and it was sold for, like I told you, $60 million. Even though it does not deserve this exaggerated amount of money. Again, whoever bought it because it bears the name of Cézanne, the high and mighty Cézanne. Okay, are you getting the idea? We'll
Yes.
come back to still life later, and we'll unpack it and see, the different components and stuff like that. So again, back to Cézanne. He was born in the south of France, and the south of France is full of, it's the countryside, and of course, the countryside size. The countryside is, very beautiful. It's this pure part of the world where you have rivers and mountains and singing birds. It's this green world that everybody would love sometime to go there and perhaps have some relaxation and stuff. So if he was born in the south of France, where he is surrounded by, simple people in villages, mountains, and rivers, he would be inspired by these things. If he's talented and he has this painting talent, that would be reflected in his paintings, as we're going to see. But typical of people who live in the countryside, they are away. They live on what we call the margins. Okay, so this is something that let's agree on that. If you live in the city, if you live in the capital, this is called the center, and those who live in the south or even in the north, away from the center, are called or are said to live on the margins, and the margins are normally not given the due care and the due attention that they deserve. I'm sure you're familiar with this. People who come from the south, they normally suffer neglect and lack of attention. The services are not as good as those in the city and in the capital, right? So if you were born on the margins, either in the south or in the north, not in the center, of course you don't have services, and one of those services would be the idea of media. You're not covered. If you have a talent. If you have, if you're talented, whether you're singing or writing poetry or painting and stuff, you are not likely to get recognized because all the lights are there in the center, right? In Riyadh and in Jeddah, for example, not in the south, for example. So that's why people from the south would come in order to make it big in the world. If they have talents, they would come to Jeddah, they would come to Riyadh, and if they are really talented, they would be recognized. So Cézanne was like everybody else. He was a native of the south of France, where there is not a great deal of light, shed on talents over there. So what is it that he's going to do? He's going to go all the way to Paris. And when he goes to Paris, he's going to try his hand. I mean, you need to also remember that people in Paris, in terms of perhaps behaving and stuff, they would behave in a little bit different way from those who come from the south. And the people in the south are normally, for example, they are a little bit, pure and innocent, and they have this measure of naivety to their character. They believe what other people tell them. They never question what other people tell them. I'm sure you have seen movies where people from the south or from the margins are featured, and they are normally looked upon as naive, as innocent, and as all these kinds of things. So again, you'll have Cézanne coming from the south of France to Paris. He thinks that he is talented, and he paints, and he will go and try his hand. In going to the south, in going to Paris, he was following his friend Emile Zola, and Emile Zola is a very famous friend. Of course, at the time he wasn't that famous. He wasn't popular. He wasn't even known. He had a friend by the name of Emile Zola, who was also from the south of France. Emile Zola was a writer, and they were friends. Emile Zola went to Paris, and Cézanne caught up with him perhaps 2 years or 3 years later. Again, Zola was a writer, while Cézanne was a painter. Zola was obviously very encouraging. I mean, he would talk to Cézanne, and he would say that you may be having bad luck, but always remember that you are very talented, and this is something that other people would envy you. You shouldn't be complaining. How can you complain when all you have to do to succeed is exercise your fingers and become a worker? A worker means that you are talented, it is true, but you need to also work on this talent. You need to develop techniques, and you need to see how people do stuff, and you need to tweak your style, your natural style, so that it can fit the requirements. So again, Emile Zola was very supportive of Cézanne, and perhaps part of the inspiration that Cézanne had was from Zola, who was always speaking very highly of him. Again, it all comes down to the idea of being first and foremost talented, a natural born talent, and then you would complete that and enhance that with training. Talent is obviously not everything. But which comes, I'm asking, which comes first, talent or perhaps training? So any poet, any artist should have the two, but which comes first, talent or training?
Talent.
Talent. You start off talent.
Talent.
You have to have the talent, and then you train so that you can enhance this talent, right? So you can you be a poet through training alone?
No, of course.
No,
No.
right? You have to
No.
have the talent, right? Very good.
Yes, sure.
Okay. Can you have the talent without training?
Yes, they can have the talent, but it
Can be
needs
natural.
training.
Yeah, yeah. So
There-
yeah, you will, but something is going to be missing.
Yes.
You can be writing poetry, you can be painting and everything because you have the talent, but obviously you have to train. You have to enhance the talent through training, through
To improve,
exposure.
yes,
Yes,
to improve the talent, we must take training.
yes, that's correct. Okay.
In order to achieve the level.
Yes. You need to also you don't live in a bubble, right? You live in a community where people are agreed on a number of artistic principles. You have to follow them. Okay, so there is of course a measure of freedom. So typical of artists, you need to also have your own style and your own tone and your own voice, but you shouldn't be, deviating entirely from the artistic norms, right? You can be different, but in a measured way, if you like. Which, by the way, Cézanne was not. Cézanne was a real rebel when it comes to, painting. He charted his own unique way, if you like, and it worked for him, and it was worth it. We now know Cézanne not because he was a traditionalist, but because he is a modernist in the sense that he has his own tone, his own voice, and his own artistic temperament. Okay, there is always this remark about Cézanne that he, for all the beauty of his talent, for all the beauty of his products, he still lacks those artistic techniques that would endear him to everybody. There is a sector of society that accepts him and recognizes him, but there are other people who believe that he is not the best of all possible artists. It's simply because of the fact that he was always struggling with the problems of technique. He has issues with technique, and technique, of course, is something that you acquire. You're not born with techniques, right? You are born with talent. Okay. Now let's talk about teachers, for example. If you're a teacher, you're born with a talent, but the techniques of teaching are things that you acquire later through training, through experience, and everything, right? So this is the issue that we normally have, critics, art critics had with Cézanne. He has an authentic artistic temperament, but he had issues with technique. And of course, by technique, we would say procedures for performing an operation that tend to require practice and that improve with practice. uh, at the time, when he came to Paris in order to prove himself, and of course, you know, Paris is the city of light, and you know, in order to make it big, you go to Paris. He went to Paris, and at the time there was this French salon, and salon is like it's more or less like an artistic gathering that they have perhaps every year annually. And this salon is where, as a painter, you introduce or you present your paintings. In order to be allowed into the salon, you have to follow certain rules and regulations in your paintings. You don't just you don't just paint in your own unique way and believe that you would be accepted. No, they have, again, they have their own artistic guidelines, and you have to accept and follow those traditional guidelines. Those guidelines were influenced by the traditional values of the the French Academy of Fine Arts. There is, again, it's like having like a manual or a handbook that tells you what to do and what not to do when you paint. So if you follow the manual and you go and to present in the salon or the salon, you will be accepted. But if you write in your or if you paint in your own way, there is this likelihood, this high likelihood that you wouldn't be accepted. Again, when Cézanne went in order to present in the salon, of course, he was declined. He was rejected. Why? Because he was painting using his own unique style. He was not following any of the rules set by the salon. Okay, so what to do if you're not accepted in the salon? Nobody is going to look at your paintings. Nobody's going to kind of buy your paintings. So you don't have a chance. Go and think of perhaps another job or another career. Okay, so, and this is actually what happened with him. He tried his hand a number of times, but he insisted on having his own voice and his own tone and his own guidelines. Okay, so the result is known. He wouldn't be accepted in the salon. Over time, there is obviously a gap between when he submitted for the first time and got refused and rejected, and when he was finally accepted. He was finally accepted in 1863. So what did he do before getting accepted? I mean, he met a number of like-minded artists who also believe that the salon has rigid rules and guidelines that would limit their potential as artists. They used to believe that as artists they are free, they have free spirits, and there shouldn't be restrictions on how to paint. So it was him and other people. They formed a group of independent painters, and they said, listen, we're going to keep painting the way we think is correct. We're not going to follow the rigid rules and guidelines of the salon, and let's see what will come out of it. So those group of people, among them, of course, was Cézanne, came to be known as the Impressionists. So this was the group that came to be known as the Impressionists. So Impressionists means that at the core of the painting process, there is this impression that you take. You don't. I will talk about Impressionism in details in a few minutes. But basically, Impressionism is about impressions that you try to reproduce in your piece of art. So, and if it's about impressions, it's not. We're not talking about detailed recapturing of reality, if you like. So, impressions are about, you know, um, I mean, things that you take from nature, from a certain experience, but you don't delve deep into the reality of the thing. You don't give details. Okay, so this was the group that Cézanne and the others formed because they were declined and rejected by the Salon, and because they wanted to paint away from the rigid rules and guidelines of the Salon. Again, the Impressionists are going to become big, and they are going to assume a very prestigious place in the history of European paintings, as you're going to see. And the idea of painting away from the Salon would also bring us to the idea of tradition and modernity. Will have this polarity, will have this distinction, will have this contrast between whatever is traditional and whatever is modern. Of course, the Salon and its rigid guidelines would represent tradition, while Cézanne and his Impressionist colleagues would represent the new reality, would represent modernity. So let's talk about those Impressionists, those who wanted to paint differently, of course, from the Salon and its rigid guidelines. You have people like Cézanne, you have people like Claude Mounier, Camille Pissarro, Auguste Renoir, and Per Morciel. Excuse my French. My French is, I mean, it's not. I don't speak proper French. And Alfred Cecily and Edgar Degas or Degas, I don't know how to. Anyway, these were, the Impressionists that Cézanne was part of. Again, the Impressionists came as reaction to the rigid forms of the Salon. Again, because of his rebellious nature, Cézanne is not going to stay even with the Impressionists for long, because they, over time, they are going to come up with their own rules and regulations and guidelines, which Cézanne is going to find also rigid. He is a free spirit who wouldn't settle for rigidity. You wouldn't confine him and limit him in one form or another. That's why over time he would have to go away from them and chart his own way. Again, let's look at how people at the time used to look at Cézanne. He would also participate in exhibitions, and the result would be, varying between or from moderate support to scathing dismissal. So people would say nice stuff about him, and other people would ridicule and make fun of him. And here is an example. There is an art critic by the name of Prouver, and he speaks very ill about Cézanne. He would say, shall we mention, and I'm quoting the guy, shall we mention Cézanne, who, by the way, has his own legend? No known jury has ever, even in its dreams, imagined the possibility of accepting a single work by this painter. So this is obviously criticism. This is saying that he wouldn't be accepted at all, not even one single work. He who came to the salon carrying his painting on his back, like Jesus Christ carrying his cross. So again, this is a reference to the salon. He wasn't accepted in the salon because he was not painting according to the rules and the guidelines of the salon. So he's making fun of him, as you can see. We have another art critic at the time by the name of George Riviere, and this guy was different. He said nice stuff about Cézanne, and he would compare Cézanne's work to some of the most prestigious works from the classical canon. He would say, for example, that Cézanne is a painter and a great painter. He would compare him to classical models. Again, we're moving towards a special kind of paintings that Cézanne was very famous for, which is, it's classical in the sense that it has a whole tradition. It's called nude or near nude paintings. And this is again classical, taken from Greek paintings, where you normally have nymphs bathing in a lake, for example, and how white and beautiful those nymphs and those mythical creatures were, according to Greek mythology. This genre that Cézanne excelled at was called bathers. And bathers, when you bathe, it means that you take, you go into a lake and you swim and stuff like that. Again, this is one of the real contributions of Cézanne. He was very skillful when it comes to bathers and nude paintings. Again, that would bring us to the different genres that we have when it comes to painting in terms of subject matter. What other genres do we have when we talk about paintings? We would have history painting, we would have landscape, we would have portraiture, we would have still life, and also scenes from everyday life. But these are the different genres when we talk about art, when we talk about painting. Again, Cézanne's pictures of bathers occupy a substantial proportion of his total output. So most of his work is this genre that we call bathers. We'll talk about that in detail later. Do you have any questions so far?
No, doctor, thank you.
No, thank you.
Okay, very interesting, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's better than
Again,
Christopher Marlowe.
لا,
Sorry to say it, but it's better than Christopher Marlowe.
all of them فيهم خير والله. That's you know what is interesting about this course. What I like about this course is the fact that you have variety. I mean, at one point you would have history,
Yes.
another. Yeah, this is what is engaging and appealing about it. Really, it's not all, for example, literature. It's not all, art. But I think, and this is a plus. This is a big plus, right?
Yes. Yes,
Um,
right. Yes, Doctor.
Yes.
طيب, would you like us to, we have finished a part. Would you like us to stop on this part and pick this up next time, inshallah?
رشا كاميرتك
Oh.
مفتوحة.
والله mine?
No.
No, wait.
Could you repeat, Doctor, what did you say?
I said that we're going to stop on this note and with this item.
Yes.
As agreed. And next time, inshallah, we'll pick this up. I would like you, perhaps by next time, I would like you to have finished reading that chapter, and also go to the book that we have, the book of illustrations, and look, skim through the different paintings and try to give yourself the opportunity to appreciate their beauty.
Which book?
You guys have another book, and it's a very it's a long book. I think it's red, where it's called illustration book, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. So I would like you to go there and look at the paintings by Cézanne, and especially still life. He's very famous for still life paintings. Okay, and inshallah I'll see you next time.
Excuse me.
Yes, go ahead.
Is there a PDF for this book?
Yeah,
PDF
this
file?
one is. Yeah, it is. By the way, I took it from the group. I think lots of people have it. If you
No,
can,
not the reputation. It's for the illustration book.
I'm not sure. I haven't seen
Yeah.
one.
Already sent by through our emails. We receive it on emails.
طيب, if you can share it, I mean, if you can share it with the young
please.
lady. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, it's okay. I will.
Can you share it, please?
Okay,
Because my
thank you.
email is not working.
Okay, I will share it in the group.
Okay.
Yes, thank you so much.
طيب,
Thank you.
like I said, we'll stop on this note, and until we meet next time, inshallah, I wish you all the best. Assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام. شكرا دكتور.
عفوا.
شكرا